Hi, everybody. It's May 18th, and this is the Backdrop Weekly Developer Meeting. We get together every week to talk about development priorities for the Backdrop project. This week, we have exciting news that Backdrop 125 was released just 3 days ago. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about the things that got in and the things that still need to be done, post-release tasks, and maybe start looking towards 126. So we'll do some quick introductions. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the Internet, core committer and co-founder of the project, and calling in from Oakland, California. We'll start with Luke, and then we'll go to Tim, and then Greg, since it's a small group today.
I'm Luke McCormick, sell ear on various things that have handles. I'm a web project manager in San Ramon, California.
Thanks, Luke.
Tim Erickson. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. St. Paul Tim in most of the forums and places. And yeah, that's it. Go ahead, Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg. I'm joining from Greece, but usually in Melbourne, Australia. Yeah, interested to help in any way that I can.
All right. Jen is usually with us to do the contrib updates, but she's not today. But looks like we had one new contrib module released this past week, AuthMap, which I'm curious to see. It looks like Laren is responsible for this one. Or Joel Steedle looks like possibly may have been a contributor here. I'm curious why it's being used, but looks like probably like all things, it's a backwards compatibility thing. AuthMap, the table we took out of Backdrop Core like way back in 1.0 because it was never used by Core. It was just an empty table all the time. So yeah, I'm curious to see that module in use. But thank you for submitting it. It's great to have it in contrib. So yeah, let's talk about 125 first. We have a number of follow-ups yet that still need to be performed, so post-release tasks. I think some of these, like the front page, I'm looking at the checklist right now, the release issue. Yeah, the front page has been updated already. So we've got some things. The localization server needs to be updated. We were talking about tweeting earlier before the recording and whether or not tweeting is really even a thing anymore. It probably wouldn't hurt to continue to post it. It seems like businesses are the last standing tweeters on Twitter. Those organizations that are still hoping that there's somebody on that platform. Yeah, but do you have some input there, Tim?
No, then I agree. We have a Mastodon account too, so I'll definitely tweet there. And I think it's worth. There's no reason not to tweet it out, but I'm not going to put a lot of effort into it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Is the norm or the etiquette now to be calling it tooting instead of tweeting?
That was the term for Mastodon, was to toot, but they've actually kind of officially replaced that with posting. But a lot of the old school Mastodon are still like tooting.
There you go.
But the new school Mastodoners don't. They don't like the double entendres that can be made. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes being cute comes back to bite you, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and Luke, I know you had a start on the blog posts, and I guess you just talked about it probably during the marketing meeting. Do we need to recap that here? Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just stuck on one thing actually. I keep wrestling with how to describe the context from layouts and views that we went over. So like I kind of get it, but like I could recognize it in a lineup now. I'm having trouble actually
verbalizing what
yeah.
it is. So maybe we can solicit maybe we can solicit some help in Zulip from other members of the community that,
That's it.
actually, yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Is I'll just start a little thing, say, help me with these words. Or help me get 2 or 3 sentences that describes how this works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was trying to think about this phrasing a little bit too, and I kind of think that maybe I don't know if this is better. That previously, so both layouts and views pulled from the URL, and now you can make it so that layouts pull from the URL and then pass that to views. So it like changes the control structure where it's like previously both things were tied to the URL, and now it's one thing that ties to the URL and then passes it to views. And I'm trying to think if you could visualize that, like pulling from it, take the URL and point little arrows down to views and layouts, and then now
Oh,
it's like
it's
more
not just
like,
that, it's also just understanding. Like I'm definitely gonna have to have somebody else write these particular words because I thought I got it. And then I went and I test like what I thought was a new feature. I tested in 1.24 and it worked there too. I'm like, no, so that must not be it.
yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is that there's nothing that you can't accomplish now that you couldn't accomplish before. It's a control order of operations thing that now things work in a way that people, or maybe at least the developers, expect it to work. But you could do the same thing previously. It's just that you would do it in a different way.
Yeah, it's more streamlined. Well, depending on how people see it now, but it's more streamlined. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was sold on it. Like when you demoed, I was like, oh yeah, that's great. But
Yeah, I think that the way that I described it in the previous marketing meeting is that I don't know what it is until I have to use it, and then I could describe it. Because I didn't have a need for it so far, but I know it's cool.
yeah.
Yeah, you know what I've actually found that is pretty useful is, and actually now I'm saying this, I have a ticket that I think I can close now. I did. Oh wait, no, I don't. Well, maybe I do. Just thinking about this, that uh, when I was demoing it to Luke, I found that it was really beneficial that if a view doesn't expose its context to layouts, and you make a block, you can place that view on any layout in your entire site, even ones that don't necessarily have nodes available, and it won't render anything because there's no node for it to actually load. But I found that it's nice that now that views exposes its layouts to, or its layout context to layout module, the blocks don't show up unless the context is actually available now, and I think that's really cool. But it's like the
Yep.
I'm sorry, I try not to.
it's like the I got you, Tim. I got you muted. It's like the placing of fields. The placing, all the field blocks don't show up unless there's actually a node context available, and it makes views behave in that same way, which is really cool. That views only show up when their appropriate context is available now, if you use
That's cool.
that approach.
Yeah,
Or
it
of course,
reduces-
permissions. If you don't have permissions to see a node, it doesn't show up in menus and things like that, right? Like it cascades nicely and you can.
Yeah.
less
Yeah,
less options. When you add blocks, it would be less options if they're not applicable to the layout that you have configured. In other words, yeah.
Yep. I have a ticket open where I have I wanted to do a block that was for the current node, so that if you wanted to, which sounds really silly, why would you place the current node on a node? But it's because I wanted to use 2 display modes, where I had a display mode for the hero section and then a display mode for the content section, and I wanted to display those in 2 different regions, so I was rendering the same node twice in 2 different view modes. But I think that could still be useful because like you can achieve that. You could have achieved that previously too, again through views. You just would have wrapped it in a view first. But I think there's no need that a view needs to be involved in that whole process. So that ticket still maybe is valid, but it's still a really weird request, and I don't think anyone else has supported that request that I made a while ago. Not
So,
an
so this
80% situation.
this
What?
it seems like as good a time as any to bring up. I just tested, and like I knew this, like when you do a feature request in GitHub, one of the questions it says is, one of the prompts it says is, draft of feature description, which is, what what I was wrestling with here, and I'm curious, why don't we have those? like it is feature request not typically used? Are people blowing it off, or can we insert that somehow into the process?
Yeah, so elaborating more. So there's in the template, when you file a feature request, there's a section for summarize what this feature request would be.
Yeah.
And people don't fill it out. And and I think that one of the key things there might be is that requests almost always change from the time that they're filed to the time that they're finished.
Well, yeah. So I mean, a better solution for that is probably when it gets committed
Completed.
to a release, like that should be a checklist item. Like, okay, this, because otherwise you end up doing it like right at the very end, and they get, it log jam stuff. So and a lot of them are easy, right? Like when it's easy, it's easy. But when it's not easy, then it becomes a thing, and probably doesn't need to be a thing.
I know that we are trying to minimize the use of labels in GitHub, but we already have the needs translation update and needs change record. So I think that we need some sort of needs promo line, whatever blurb thing, so that then we can have it on a list. So we can filter the list of issues with that, and people can come back and do it.
Yeah, some things like needs change log, we actually don't even close the issue until that particular thing is done, and then it stays in the queue. I don't know how I feel about not closing issues that don't have a promotional summary yet, but maybe.
Yeah, why
not? I'm going to make
I
just another. I don't feel strongly about this, but because some people are concerned about the idea of a tag for this, seems like. I mean, we know there's never more than like 8 or 12 issues that need these, and we know right where they are. They're in the milestone label.
Yeah.
So we already have a place to go where we can see all the issues that need them. What we don't see is whether or not they've been done yet, right?
Exactly.
So you can't just glance at the list and see they've been done, but there's only 12 of them. So you could just scroll through, if somebody wanted to work with these. I'm not sure if a tag is really going to help, but it might.
I like the idea. I mean, part of it is there's a bunch of pieces to this. Like it. Ideally, it should help with our general promotional thing. Like we kind of want to identify when these things go in, whether they're big features that we want to make a big deal about or not. So besides including like needs a blurb, there's also like needs to be talked about at all. Like this is major, shout to the rooftops, or this is just fix. Don't highlight it much. And I'm for example, like I'd be willing to take the first crack at any of these, and like if they just fall out obvious, because what we don't want to do is add more work to everybody who's already overworked, adding like another step of things to be done. So
yeah, well, I don't know where I land on this either. I think making the tag seems relatively harmless, because worst case scenario, we would delete the tag and then that information would be lost later, and so we could give it a shot. So I don't really see a downside to at least trying it. So, well, I mean, I guess maybe there's a downside that there's yet another label. But it seems fairly innocuous. So it seems
Seems-
kind of okay.
Yeah.
Do we have
Since we're
label
on the
inflation?
subject, since we're on the subject of that, I was in the habit without testing, like I was leaving the testing of issues to others. And I was just doing the code review for, inconsistencies or coding standards or things that are code related, right? And I needed a way to mark the issue as code reviewed, right? So I got into the habit of marking it as PR is RTBC, and then people would get confused because it had both the RTBC and needs testing. So I said that we most likely need a new thing that says PR needs code review, or sorry, PR code looks good or something like that. So in order for an issue to be RTBC'd, we need to have two things: tested, we already have a tag which is works for me, right? But we don't have a tag that we can tag by, a label that we can tag by that says I've looked at the code, seems fine to me, but I didn't test it, right? I'll leave that to others. And what I've been doing so far is I would go and mark it as RTBC, and that would confuse people and say, no, that's not proper. So I don't know how you would feel about that, Nate, like adding another label that says code looks good.
I think this could work. I've always felt like the testing or the code review shouldn't happen until the testing is done. So I didn't think we needed this label, but I guess if people want to do it that way, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing really wrong with like you don't always need to change the label when you've done an action. Like if you come in and you review something and you say this looks good to me, but it still needs more review, then that's the whole update, and you don't change the labels at all.
Yeah, it's just, and you might be right, because I was thinking that if I add a comment that says the code looks good to me and I don't change any labels, there's a risk of that being buried in the comments then. So I needed a way to say that, hey, someone did a code review and the solution seems appropriate. It's just we need someone to actually test things, and that person that did the code review didn't actually test it. So I was thinking that we could delegate responsibilities or tasks, and these could happen asynchronously. People that have time on their hands and can do code reviews do not have to wait for the testing to happen before they actually look at the code.
Yeah, another thing I've done before is if actually like you've done a code review but it needs testing, so you can remove the needs code review label, and then it just doesn't need it, right?
Right. But don't add RTBC. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, but don't add RTBC. Yeah, they're not necessarily like one step equals the next step. Yeah.
Right.
So maybe this is better. My gut reaction is that if I were testing an issue that didn't have the code review label, is that I would like automatically add that. But I could de-learn that. Okay. Because again, it's always been my assumption that these things happen in an order. So again, I've always assumed that we want to do a code review after the testing is done. So my feeling has always been that like when I finish testing it, now someone needs to code review it, not before I've tested it, because we don't even know if it worked. Right.
Yeah, it can happen the other way. Like someone can come and test it and say, oh, it works for me. And then someone reviews the code and says, nope, that's not the right implementation. So
well, yes, but that follows a step 1, 2, 3, right? And you want to do 1, 3, 2. It is the way I think about it. Anyways,
yeah. I see it happen in all orders.
Well, then maybe we need some kind of. Then maybe we do need a tag, or we need to understand that if the code review button has been removed, that means it's been done.
Yeah.
Or
Then I shouldn't re-add it. Like when I do a test, if I see that there's no code review, I guess what I would look to see is, was it once there, and then when did it get removed?
Yep.
Yeah. And I see kind of where you're heading, because a lot of things come in, and because people don't have permissions to add the labels, issue curators go through and they add the labels as needed. But yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily always added. I've done this before where I've removed like needs code review because I've code reviewed it, but I'm not sure about whether or not it should be done. And so sometimes I remove needs code review, but I add like needs feedback still because I'm just like, well, I mean, it is
Mhm.
good if we want to do it. So, but that's usually, that usually ends up with like works for me being added, but and
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
What
I'm pretty fluid with the way that labels are used.
There's one nice feature for GitHub that when you do a code review, you can approve it. So there's a separate button for approving it, and then it says that that person has approved that person. So you can have multiple approvers in the code review, but that's in the pull request. It's not reflected in the issue. You have to, like, we don't currently have a way to reflect that.
Yeah, and I also think approvers, unfortunately, are also that's also permissioned somehow, and I don't think that everybody can do that. Greg, even normal issue queue people, I don't think actually have the permission to do approvals, because that actually means something to GitHub, that approvals sometimes are required in order to do merges, and so that's like a higher level of permission. I think that only you may have. It's not common.
Fair enough.
But I don't mind it. I do find it helpful when
No, I'm saying that I've been
when the
using.
core team does approvals. I think that that's helpful.
Yeah. All I was saying is that I've been using it as a workaround, but there's no way to reflect that I've done that in the issue queue. So I need.
Yeah.
That's why I brought up the whole. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so let's wrap up that conversation because we have some other things. Let's see. So we talked about tweeting. Looks like Greg, you just got Tugboat up to date. Thanks so much.
Yep.
That'll be a big help for the demos. And looks like we still have a couple of websites to update, but some of them have already been updated. So yeah, so the follow or the total checklist is 6115. And yeah, it's just kind of the normal items that we need to get wrapped up.
I should mention that as part of updating the Tugboat, we delete the existing instances, and there were some that were spun up like 5 minutes before I did it and 20 minutes before I did it, which we have to destroy because they use up 1.5 gigabyte of space, because if we rebuild a new one, versus only a few megabytes. So apologies for anyone that has lost their demos before the 24 hours that we say that they last, but it had to be done. It only once every quarter, or sorry, every 4 months. So sorry.
Yeah, I don't think that we need to worry too much about people
Exactly.
losing their ephemeral sandboxes, but yeah. It is kind of nerve-wracking to be like, oh, sorry. Yeah. Let's see. So,
real quick question: do we have stats? Maybe I've asked this before on how many sandboxes get spun out. Is there a way to track that?
Yes.
That would be. Oh, there is. How?
Well, you have to log in. You have to be one of the admins for the Tugboat thing, and then you can see how many there's spun. But the oldest that you see is the 24 hours, the one that was spun up 24 hours before.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't keep track of how many have been spun in the previous days, but you can see how many have been spun up in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I was thinking that would be a really awesome thing in our analytics to start tracking historically how many sandboxes have been spun up, because that is actually really valuable information.
Do you know anyone in Tugboat that can?
Well, this isn't Tugboat. I'm talking about like Google Analytics. Like, we track like did they click the create sandbox button, and then we can track it that way.
That's something our SEO team that's been working on Wednesdays could, which is basically Justin and me and Ray. I'll bring that up to them. Let's figure out a way to track that.
Yeah, because I know Google has all kinds of like I can't remember what they're called. Like when you complete something, it's like a conversion.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That should be counted as a conversion.
Yes, we can do that. I was thinking of it as a Tugboat report, but it totally could be done in analytics. So yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
if they've started a demo, that's like almost the best possible outcome we could do on backdropcms.org is actually have them use it. So
right.
Yeah. I also just want to reiterate again, Like I was setting up a demo the other day for a client, and I had to set up a Drupal demo and a backdrop demo, and it drives me nuts that there's not like a Drupal demo anywhere. I'm like, how do you try this thing out? So yay, I love that. Yeah, I love that we have the sandboxes. They're so great.
Simply test me.
Yeah, that takes longer than a few seconds, but I have I don't know if I mention it now publicly, maybe they're gonna bring it down. Softaculous, Softaculous spins up D7, D8, D9. I'm not sure about D8, but D9 and D10 demos in like 10 seconds, and WordPress and what have you. So it's a good way to spin up Drupal sites, better than simply test me. If you want to get something done quickly, that's it.
You know, actually, I'd forgotten about Simply Test Me, quite honestly, Luke, because first of all, it's not on the Drupal website, but Drupal started using Tugboat, you know, and I thought that was kind of, for some reason, that I stopped thinking about Simply Test Me, because you don't need Simply Test Me to test pull requests anymore. So I kind of thought that it maybe had passed, but it just slipped out of my mind. So that's a great point.
It is, and it wasn't working for a few years, but in the last at least half year, they fixed things, so it started working again.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's why I stopped thinking about it. It wasn't working.
I gave up on it for a few years, actually, while they were transitioning to Tugboat or Composer based, whatever they were doing. In at least the D7 sites were broken, like the instances. But yeah, it has been fixed recently.
Yeah, I see. I'm trying to spin it up now, and I see. Yeah, it takes a while, and it's it crashed. It
Yes.
it didn't work.
Yeah, it can happen sometimes.
Yeah.
Greg, where's this Softaculous one that you said? That sounds.
I'll post a link in Zulip so that others can benefit from it. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. So let's see. 125. Yeah, we have the blog post that needs to be written. I don't think that there's anything new since we kind of talked last week. I guess we can say we can celebrate the fact that we got in all of the follow-up issues, the 4 follow-up issues that we needed to do that we discussed last week. All of them got cleared and completed kind of at the last minute, but they did get done. So we can celebrate that all of those things got out there. And as far as I've heard, the 125 release has been pretty smooth. I haven't heard any. There hasn't been any tickets filed that I've seen that are like major regressions, or actually I haven't seen any regressions yet filed for 125. So that's great. It seems like this is almost like, I think that we're getting better. Like the last couple of releases, we've had the 2-week window, and we're like, are we going to make a bug fix release or not? Of course, now I shouldn't start talking because, you know,
Jinx us.
Gonna jinx it, yeah. But previously, like I saw Laren updated Pantheon right away, and previously we'd been doing like a 2-week wait before updating Pantheon. I think our confidence is just growing a lot that the releases seem to be pretty great right off the bat. Okay, so yeah, I just want to talk about a couple of things that we didn't really focus for 125, but I think that 126, we need to get cracking on them as quickly as possible. And there's 2 issues that I mentioned before the meeting that I'd like to see us get to really quickly. And that's the first one is 3106, which is updating jQuery to jQuery 3 instead of jQuery 1. It's in a milestone candidate minor. It doesn't have an advocate yet, but it has a pull request. There's a lot of great conversation around it. It's not nearly as bad as I had originally thought it was, and so I think this is a great candidate.
We don't need an advocate because it's not a new feature; it's a task actually. So.
Oh, is that? I didn't even realize that was a policy exception.
Yeah, so the advocates are required for new features to get in, and this is a task, something that needs to happen. It's just the reason why it's set into a minor milestone is because it's a big change and there's chances of breaking things. So we're just being conservative, I guess.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm just gonna move it in there.
Well, I've assumed the advocate thing was for anything in a major release, so, but that's,
Sorry, when you say major, that would be Backdrop 2, but
yeah, no, you're right, a minor release.
yeah.
You know, anything in a point release, I've assumed. Basically, we've said to add something to the milestone, it has to have an advocate. I don't think we've said it to add a new feature. If we, I'll go look at the wording for the,
Already ahead of you.
okay.
I'm looking-
So what I've been noticing on every backdrop is that automated security scanning is getting a lot better and a lot more prolific. And I've noticed that even in doing commits to Backdrop Core, every single time I commit now, I get a flag about one security issue that affects the Backdrop project, and it's our old version of jQuery. And GitHub doesn't know that we've applied the patches to jQuery to make it better. And I think maybe they've specifically started scanning for old versions of jQuery because it's a really prolific project, and this problem is probably really common. But even though we are patched, all of these scanners still identify it as a vulnerability, and that's a little. I mean, it's just a small annoyance for the core committers, but it's potentially a really big problem for people that are auditing their sites and seeing that they're thinking that Backdrop is not secure out of the box. And so I'm gonna say
I
that
think
the
that we-
urgency is increasing, even though the situation hasn't changed much, and that like it's becoming it's bubbling up to more people than it had been in the past, in a not very good way.
I think that the sooner that we merge it in this cycle, the better the chances we have to catch any problems, because we have the whole cycle ahead of us. So we should that to happen as soon as possible.
So that issue is 3106, has a pull request. I think it's in a really good spot. Yeah, and make it the default for new installations. I absolutely agree with that as well. But we'll still have the ability. This issue is basically like allows you to go back to the 1.x version if necessary. So not taking out entirely, and doesn't break existing sites, which will continue to use the old version as they update. But then they can switch to the new one. So that's one issue that would be fantastic to start moving on. And the other one that just surprised me was 5913, which is enable entity reference on new installations. Just the entity reference isn't turned on by default currently. And I think it should be. That we don't have a way to do node references out of the box without it. We do have term reference that's turned on by default, and I think maybe that's one of the concerns, is that we have both term reference and entity reference, and they do different things. But I think that that's something that we maybe could be fine with.
Sure.
I'm happy that Olaf wrote a blurb for it.
Yeah. A little Backdrop now not only includes entity reference, but enables it out of the box. Winky face. Yeah, 5913 is that issue. And this one, maybe we don't need to get moving on quickly, but we need to start arguing about it as soon as possible. Because there's no technical barrier whatsoever here. This is all entirely a discussion, and there are other follow-up items related to entity reference, and I wonder if any of them are valid, saying, hey, we need to do this first before we turn on any reference by default.
Since we're on the topic of bigger changes, there's two things that have always been in my list, and I'd like to bring them up each time. And no pressure, Nate, but I think they're both waiting on you.
I know what one of them is. Yeah. Go ahead.
Automatic core updates, yes, and CK editor is the other. So these two things. And my next question is like, were you planning to take a sabbatical from work? Ever? It's like,
A sabbatical to do
You
work
do
for
just
free.
backup stuff.
I don't have any
yeah.
long stretches of time available in the near future.
Oh no. And unfortunately, you're at least for CK editor, you're the expert on it. So I
Yeah,
don't know
but
if
there
you
could
wanna-
be other experts, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, I've been loosely tracking things, not on our side, but I've been interested to see how things are developing over on the Drupal side of things. For our projects at Lullabot, at least, we're still not using CKEditor 5, even on brand new installs today, because there's still a lot that 5 doesn't do. And there's still a lot of unanswered questions about like how soon other modules are going to be ready to use 5.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah,
upstream bugs as well. The other day we had it strips empty tags, blank tags. It strips them out, behaves oddly, and it's waiting. It's been pending for several months now on upstream. So there's
Yeah.
quite a few things. I know that for some time they were offering both versions in core, and the default was switched to 5, but I can't find the 4 option. I think in latest. At least 10.1. So
yeah,
I'm not-
I thought it was a strange thing, the suddenness with which it occurred in Drupal, because from what I saw, CKEditor 4 was marked as deprecated in Drupal 9, but CKEditor 5 actually didn't show up until Drupal 10, maybe.
no, it was before in
It
one of
was
the
before. There
nine-
was a period of time where both of them were
yes.
in at the same time. I just missed it, I guess. But yeah, now on new installs, you have to download it from Contrib. It moved back into Contrib, the CKEditor 4 module.
Okay.
I think it's under the CKEditor namespace even. So what's old is new again. Yeah, so I totally acknowledge that. That is something that we really need to get moving on. CKEditor 4, as far as I know, still is end of lifing in November. Same date as Drupal 9, I think, is the overall plan. I appreciate that the CKEditor team is coordinating in that way, that they actually pinned it to the end of life of Drupal 9. So yeah, there's definitely some urgency there. Speaking of automatic security scanning, flagging old stuff, like that's another potential candidate. Totally. Yeah, I think that's the biggest priority. Automatic updates would be fantastic as well. That's not actually specifically, that's less pinned to me than CKEditor 5 is. Automatic updates, really, that problem is for the most part solved, but we need to adapt it because the automatic updates project for Drupal 7 actually is fully functioning and working. It's just that they didn't adopt it into Drupal core because the entire thing needed to be scrapped because of Composer. So we have a very good code base from which to work for automatic updates. It's just that we need to adapt it for Backdrop. And there's a server side component, which I think is always a tricky thing for us.
That's actually, by the way, I posted a link for the end of life. It's June 2023, after all.
Oh, really? It is June, so that moves it up. Yeah, that's so that means it's impossible for us to get out CKEditor 5 release in time, really.
Yeah,
Maybe.
the page that I posted mentions some what is it called, extended support that needs to be purchased, and maybe there was an agreement between the Drupal community and CKEditor that we can benefit from if need be. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for is an additional package that can be purchased by both commercial and open source license users. Contact our sales team. It's only available for a limited time.
Yep.
Yeah, that would actually be a good idea because I think it would be valuable to us. Although I think that this has affected Drupal in the same way that if they are providing us patches and we want to include it in our code base, those patches need to be GPL. And they may have a problem with that if
Yeah.
you know
Mhm.
if they're trying to sell it, but we're applying something that makes it free, then that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, great flags all. Yeah, I think those are the items that I really wanted to talk about. And I guess 126, it's now another 4 months away, but at the same time, it's not that far away at all. So that's all I really want to talk about for today, I think. Do you guys have other topics or anything you want to bring up? Okay, well, thanks so much for being here today and celebrate the 125 release. Hooray! And yeah, thanks so much. And we'll catch you folks online and next week. So